Look at the red letters in the Bible. That what better example, what better model do we have in life than to model our lives after Christ? And again, the only way we can do that is to allow God to mold us. He is the potter and we are the clay. And I hope this morning that you allow Him to mold your life to who He wants you to be as we strive to become more and more like His Son. Let me make sure this is on. All right, we're on. If you have your Bibles, turn to Matthew chapter 7. We're going to be all over the place a little bit today, and so this is a little bit different, especially being the introduction to our time together in the red letters of the Bible and looking at the teachings of Jesus. And I hope that you're excited. I'm excited as we look at this. I know we often talk about the red letters, but we kind of group them in with all the others. Now, let me understand fully this morning that all the words of the Bible are important. They're all inspired. They're all profitable for us. But no doubt I think we could all understand that even though all the Bible is inspired, and it is, that the red letters are especially important to pay attention to because those are the words that came specifically from Jesus while He was on this earth. And so these next 6 weeks or so, I really believe have the opportunity to be some of the greatest impact that we have on our church. And I believe it also can be the greatest impact that our church has ever had on this community. Now that's a bold statement to make, but I firmly believe that if we will model our lives after the teachings of Jesus, then we naturally are going to be the Christians that He desires us to be. Naturally, it's going to affect our families, it's going to affect our church, but it's got to affect our community because part of what He talks about is reaching out to others outside of these four walls that we're in right now. We have the opportunity to grow in our faith and to stretch out of our comfort zone more than ever. I was thinking this week, and I've got some pictures back there, Ryder. I was thinking this week about some knockoff items. Now, let me say this before I go into any detail. If you buy any of these items, I'm not judging you, okay? We buy some of these items probably. And so Brother Danny back there, he's already walked out because I think he knew I was going to say something. Brother Danny saw what I was doing, and he said, you're trying to stir the hornet's nest, aren't you? Trying to stir the pot by getting on people for buying knockoff stuff or secondhand stuff and telling people they need to buy name brands. No, that's not. We buy hardly anything name brand. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you have to admit, some of these knockoff items are quite humorous as they try to look as close as possible to the real thing, but they're not. Let's see the first one there. All right. Of course, everybody knows Kit Kat. All right. But here we have Catcot. All right. So if you buy Catcots, that's fine. It's totally up to you. But you understand. You see that, you automatically think Kit Kat, even the slogan, have a break, have a Catcot, right? And so it's very close, but it's not quite there. Go to the next one. I like this one. I'm a big fan of Oreos, but these are just called cream betweens, which I guess is the exact, it's really all that it is, cream between two cookies. Go to the next one. Now we all know M&Ms. Those are kind of overrated, so they have the H and H's, and I don't know what the H and H stands for. I really don't know M&M stands for, to be honest with you, but they look just like it. Same little peanut guy on there, just with an H instead of an M. Go to the next one. Now, we all know Tic Tac. This is just Tick Tick. And I guess it probably is just about the same, but just kind of humorous how it's so close to the original, not there. Go to the next one. Now, we love Hamburger Helper at our house, okay? Now, with a family of 6, Hamburger Helper goes a long way for our house, but I like this one. It's not Hamburger Helper, it's Hamburger Partner, okay? So I like even keeping the alliteration going. It's a strong advertising. And then we start getting into, I think there's the next one, we start getting into some of the health-related items. Go to the next one. Oh, no, this one. We all know I can't believe it's not butter. This is, I think it tastes like butter. All right? At least I hope it tastes like butter. I don't know who came up with that name, but again, if you buy, I think it tastes like butter. I'm not judging you by any stretch of imagination. It's just humorous to me to have these titles. Now, in the health-related realm of things, you also have some of these knockoffs. Go to the next one there. Instead of Crest, there's Crust. Now, I don't know why you want to brush your teeth with Crust, but some people I'm sure do. And again, it saves a little bit of money. That's 100% fine. But again, it looks just like Crest. Same color pattern and everything. It's just one letter. Go to the next one. We all know that, Olay, and this is just okay? So it's not Olay, it's just okay shampoo. So that's fine, all right? I'm sure it smells just great, and you enjoy that. And then this last one is, instead of, everybody knows Dove bars, this is the Dave bar, okay? Hydrating So the Dave bar. I think Dove is supposed to be strong enough for a man, but made for a woman's. I don't know what Dave is. Just made strong enough for a man, made for Dave. I don't know. But you have all these things about these knockoffs, and we understand that there's nothing wrong with knockoffs in and of themselves. But here's what I want to equate it to this morning. As a follower of Jesus, I don't want to just settle for, go back one. I don't want to settle for okay, right? I want to give God the best. I want to give Him, I don't want to settle for okay when I can have ole. You know what I mean? And you understand what I'm saying when it comes to serving God. Many times in our walk with God, we settle for something that's second rate, don't we? Well, we settle for something that's nowhere close to what God truly intended for us to have. And God has so much for us. God has great plans for us. As Christians, we are notorious for missing out on some of the things that God's placed right in front of us. Think about some of the things that we talked about in Sunday school, and even some of the things we looked at in our just recently in our study through the book of Galatians. Think about the children of Israel. How they had the message, but they still many times missed the Messiah. Think about Peter, who was one of the 12 disciples who spent much of his time in God's presence, but he completely missed his purpose time and time again. Now we know we're thankful. Thankfully, he accomplished that and came around, but he totally missed what God was trying to say many times on this earth. Even the Galatians that we just spent 6 months talking about, the Galatians had God's gift of salvation, but they somehow had missed God's grace, hadn't they? So sometimes what's right in front of us, what God has for us, we still miss. And I believe that extends to us today in 2021. Many times as followers of Jesus, we have great intentions. Now, I know there are some people who don't even have good intentions, but I believe most people have really, really good intentions when they're serving God, but we are completely missing out on the true opportunities that God has in store for us. We settle for second best, don't we? We settle. I believe we settle in our churches. We're thankful that God's blessed our churches. We're thankful that we have a beautiful building. No. Are we where we want to be? No. Are we as big as some churches? No. But are we bigger than others? Yes. And sometimes we slip back and we say, well, you know what? We're not where we could be, but I'm happy with where we're at. Sometimes you get in the mindset of the us four and no more churches where we're happy with our people that we have here. We don't need anybody else. That's a dangerous place to be in. But we settle for second best. And Jesus gives us the opportunity to be His disciples, to be His workers. Matthew 9:37, the Bible says, Then saith he unto His disciples, The harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. So we know there's work to be done. You look around our world today, you understand very clearly there's work to be done. And Jesus invites us to be those workers. So if we are His workers, then the next question is, how are we doing as His workers? If we as the church are those laborers, then how are we doing in that job? Well, depends on who you ask, I guess. I think if we were to, you ask the question, how are we representing Jesus? Well, I'll say this, to be quite honest with you, I believe we're miserably failing. And I'm not just talking about in this church, I'm talking about Christians in general. I believe we are miserably failing at representing Jesus the way that He should be represented. Now, some of you might be thinking, Brother Adrian, that's harsh. That's a little too harsh to be saying that. Well, think about this. When I think of Jesus, when you think of Jesus, some of the first words that come to our mind is what? We think of grace. We think of love. We think of kindness. We think of joy. And if you ask Jesus followers, other Jesus followers, what they think of fellow Jesus followers, then you get a real mixed bag of answers. You get some people that say some very positive things about other Christians. Then you have other people that say some very negative things. But the real test is when you ask people that are the ones that we're trying to reach what they think of Jesus followers. What answers do you get when you ask people outside of church, people who don't claim to be a Christian, what they think of Christians? Several years ago, there was two authors, David Kinnaman and Gabe Lyons, and they spent 3 years polling young, unchurched Americans to find out what they thought about Christians. And what they found was that millions of young people see Jesus followers as, and these are their words, judgmental, hypocritical, anti-homosexual, too political, old-fashioned, out of touch, insensitive, and flat out boring. That was what, talking to young, unchurched people, what they thought of Christians. Now, I know that your immediate reaction, like my immediate reaction when I read that, is that those characterizations are completely unfair, right? We understand that. We understand that compared with the entertainment of the world, the things of God, probably sometimes the thing in church settings are not going to be near as exciting. I had a guy tell me one time when I was just starting the ministry, and I was a youth pastor, and he said, listen, do not ever try to compete with the world when it comes to entertainment, because you'll lose every time. The world always will win out when it comes to entertainment. They have unlimited resources when it comes to entertainment. So you've got to focus on what matters. So we think, why don't these people understand all the good things that we do, like helping the less fortunate, or going into prisons and helping people, or Christians paving the way when it comes to disaster relief after huge things? Why don't these people focus on those types of things? And no doubt we can understand there's been not very good press about Christians, right? You know, we understand that our freedom of religion has been under attack for quite a while now. So we understand that's part of the answer. That's only half the answer. I want you to listen to this. A shocking 50%, half of all the people who took this poll, young, unchurched Americans, said, when asked, what do you base that negative view of Christians on? Their answer was not media. Their answer was not a friend. Here was their answer. It was based on personal contact with Christians. That answer was based on personal contact with with believers. And here's what the authors wrote. You can put this next quote up there, the writer. Here's what the authors write. Many of those outside of Christianity reject Jesus because they feel rejected by Christians. Think about that. Many outside of Christ reject Jesus on the basis simply because they feel rejected by those who are called to love all people. The fact is, we are all broken. We're all sinners. And if we take a moment to honestly reflect on how we are doing at representing Jesus, all of us, and myself included, should come to the conclusion that we have not always represented Christ well. If we're honest, that is. If Jesus is known for grace, which is getting a free gift that you don't deserve, and we're known for being judgmental, which is getting what you deserve, and that we've miserably failed as believers. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating here that we as believers just be all lovey-dovey and huggy and not confront sin and just overlook that type of stuff and say, it doesn't matter, you can live any way that you want to. I'm not advocating that at all. But you and I both know believers, who claim to be believers anyway, who are more known for being that type of judgment, always looking at the negative, always harping on things that are inconsequential, and people aren't going to come to Christ that way. If they don't see the love, Jesus says, by this y'all may know that you're my disciples, if you look down one upon another. No, that's not what he said. By this y'all may know that you're my disciples if you have love one to another. And so we have to understand this, as we look at the red letters of the Bible here, this whole idea of focusing on the teaching of Jesus was birthed out of a desire to represent the real Jesus. Because I believe that if we can give the right expression of who Jesus really is, then people will fall in love with him. I really believe that. You can put that quote up there, that next quote, writer. If we can give the right expression of who Jesus really is, do you not believe, as I do, that people will absolutely fall in love with him? I believe they will. I believe when they really see Jesus' followers living like Jesus, they're going to say, I want that. I want what they have. That if we're living like Jesus wants us to live, they're not going to look at us and go, who would want that? No. Who wouldn't want forgiveness? Who wouldn't want mercy? Who wouldn't want love? Who wouldn't want those things? And again, I'm not saying you overlook sin. I'm not saying we say that sin's acceptable. By no means, if you know me at all, that's not what I'm advocating at all. But who wouldn't fall in love with a loving, kind, gracious, merciful God? So we have to change the picture of what we're telling of Jesus. Somehow, even in our good intentions, we've not just missed by a little bit, we've missed entirely the mark. Think about all that Jesus has done for you and all that Jesus has done for me. You know, so after all that, sometimes we're still not content with representing Jesus the way we've been described. We're called to bring people close to Jesus by how we live. That's what we're called to do, by being witnesses. And somehow people are, instead of coming to Jesus, they're rejecting Christianity by how we live. We've missed the mark. If that's the mindset of millions of young people who are unchurched and unsaved, if that's their mindset, then Christians are dropping the ball. Because we are to be His hands and feet in this world. And I'll be honest with you, I just can't live with that. I can't live with the fact of knowing. It's a thought I've had numerous times in my life. I wonder how many people are in hell today because of Adrian Knotts. So what do you mean? Now, I know I can name people that are in heaven today because of me. How many people are in hell today because of me? I think often of people that I went to school with that I didn't live like I should have in front of them as a Christian, as Mr. Christian testimony. But I was hypocritical many times in my life. And I wonder how many people that I went to school with that won't grace the door of a church now. They went to a Christian school. How much is that because they saw that in my life? That I was in church every time doors were open, but I still didn't live it. It bothers me. It bothers me. We can't sit back. We can't just give in. We have to be on the offensive. We have to attack. We don't just have to change the story. We have to change the story. But how do we do that? And this is where I want to dive in a little bit. How do we do that? How do we change? How do we flip the script? Well, I believe probably one of the biggest problems that we have as believers is we just don't know what to shoot for, right? I've often said this, that in everything that we do in life, we have a goal to it. If you don't have a goal, it's like running around in circles. You pick a sport. Every sport has an end game, right? Whether it's a basketball hoop or a soccer goal or an end zone for a touchdown, whatever, there's always something you're trying to strive for. If there was no basketball goal in basketball, you'd have guys just running around all the time, stealing the ball from each other and passing it. And nobody'd watch that, right? There has to be a goal to it. But for some reason, in the Christian life, we view salvation as the goal, and that's not the goal. Salvation is the beginning. But what's the goal after salvation? Well, I've got my get out of hell free card, and I'm good to go. I'm good. I've met the goal. I've reached the mountaintop. That's what so many people think. No, you're just starting the race. What's the goal then? What is the goal in our life? Is it just to finish well? Well, that's part of it. How do we ensure that we finish well? Well, our goal is to become more and more like Jesus Christ every single day. I should be more like Christ today than I was yesterday. I should be striving to become more like Christ tomorrow than I am today. And if you'll strive to do that, if you'll strive to follow His will, then you don't have to worry about finishing well. You will finish well, and we will represent Him the way that we should. Many years ago, there was a pastor of one of the largest churches in the country. He did a massive survey, and he found that churches, including his own church, had gotten very good at drawing people in, and they call those people seeker churches, but they weren't very effective in growing and maturing them spiritually. Oh, they could run a crowd, but they weren't mature spiritually. They could pack the pews every Sunday, but people weren't growing in their faith. And here's what he said. He said churches could draw people in by offering therapeutic service that makes them feel better, but not be better. A lot of churches do that. A lot of churches make people feel better, but they're not advocating for people to be better. And so what the church needs to do is to make disciples, to grow people in the faith, to not be spectators. So how do we do that then? Well, you have to know what you're shooting for. Back in the 2004 Athens Olympics, there was a sharpshooter. I know I like the Olympics, and I hope the Olympics go on this year. I enjoy watching sports that I wouldn't normally watch, right? And our family's gotten into curling, of all things, because of the Winter Olympics. We love it. I mean, sometimes I'll find curling on TV now, and I'll just watch it, throwing that big old rock down the ice. It's just fascinating to me. Watching them and then using the little Swiffer on the thing. Just love it, okay? But I love watching the Olympics, and I love watching sports that I wouldn't normally watch. Well, I didn't realize this, but in 2004 there was a sharpshooter, and the guy's name was Matthew Emmons. Some of you may know this story, but because it wasn't one of the major sports, it probably didn't get advertised quite as much. But Matthew Emmons was far and away the best shooter in the world. Some people said that he was the best shooter that has ever lived. And that was not in question at all when he was going to the Olympics, because, there was no question he was going to win the gold. It was going to be Matthew Emmons. The only question was who was going to win the silver. That was the only question going into these Olympics, everybody knew that Matthew Emmons would win gold. Well, we understand, and I hope rifle shooters are trained to fire in between their heartbeats. It's amazing to me. But they try to slow their heartbeat down as much as possible, and they try to fire in between those beats per minute. And in sharpshooting, medals are literally won or lost by millimeters. So going into his final shot, Matthew Emmons was in first place by a mile. And all he needed to do to win the gold medal was basically hit the target. He didn't have to hit bullseye. He just had to hit the target, which for this guy was nothing. I mean, listen, he had one bullet left to shoot, and he needed a 7.2. Up to that point, on his first 9 shots, the lowest one he had out of his first 9 was 9.3. He's nowhere close to not getting this gold medal. He's going to win this thing, no doubt about it. Well, he took aim, he slowed his heartbeat, he took his final shot. Sure enough, it was bullseye. Oh man, you would think, I've done it. I've gotten the gold. Except for one small fact. The small fact was that he actually shot at the wrong target. He shot at the target that was in the other lane next to him. And in sharpshooting, that's called crossfire. And because it was a crossfire, even though it was a bullseye, he got a score of a 0. He got a goose egg. And he went from first place to 8th place. Put that next picture up there, Ryder. That was his expression after he realized what he'd done. Hit a bullseye, just the wrong target. Afterwards, in a press conference, he said he felt great going into his last shot. He said he was more concerned with calming himself down rather than looking at his target. He says the last time he had crossfired was 6 or 7 years ago. Last time he'd ever done that. And as I mentioned, he went from first place to 8th place, didn't even get a medal because he fired at the wrong target. See, why do you bring that up, Brother Adrian? Well, I bring it up because Matthew Emmons was literally the greatest shooter in the world. But if you don't know what you're shooting at, it doesn't matter, right? Greatest shooter in the world, but he shot at the wrong target. If you shoot, if you focus even on the wrong thing, you're never going to hit what you need to hit. So as Christians, we can have the best intentions in the world. We can do everything we possibly can to try to do what's right. But if we're succeeding at things that don't actually matter in our faith, then we can do more harm than good. If the targets that we're hitting in our life are judgmental and divisive and hypocritical and full of, you fill in the blank, prejudice. We try to keep things a certain way, to keep it old-fashioned or whatever, and we're focused on those types of things instead of the things that really matter. We're shooting at the wrong targets. We're shooting at the wrong targets. And there's so much noise in the world for us to contend with. Even in our faith, there's so many answers for what it means to be a follower of Jesus. So how do we do what we're supposed to do? How do we know what we're supposed to do? How do we do it? Well, that's where this red letter comes from. This is the thought. You think, how simple of a thought is this? But think about what it would mean. If we, who are followers of Jesus, would actually take the words of Jesus and put them into practice, imagine what our lives would look like. You say, well, brother, how simple is that? You're right. How simple is that? If we who claim to love Christ would simply do what Christ has said, imagine how different our lives would be. You know, I told you several weeks ago that if we would simply just obey the promises we've already made to God, imagine what our churches and our lives would look like. Well, this is the exact same thing. If we who claim to know and to love Christ would simply do what He said in His Word, imagine what the changes would be in our lives. What if we've had all the answers all along to what it means to truly, effectively follow Jesus? What if He gave them to us? Well, He did give them to us. That's the big idea. Look at Matthew chapter 7. We're going to read just a few verses of Scripture. Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them, all right, not just hear them. We're good hearers, aren't we? We're not very good doers most of the time. Who hears these sayings of mine and doeth them, by the way, these are red letters, I will liken him unto a wise man which built a house upon a rock. Now, we know this story. We sing the song. I thought about having you sing the song before. We're not going to sing the song. Wise man built his house upon the rock. We understand the song. But look at what he's saying. Who is the wise man? It's the person who hears what Jesus is saying and does it. He's like a wise man. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew, it beat upon the house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not. It's the other side of the coin. Both were hearers, weren't they? Both heard what Jesus said, but only one group did them, and the other group didn't. So if you hear what the words of Jesus are, and you know what you're supposed to do, but you don't do it, he's likened to a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and it beat upon the house, and unlike the wise man, this house built upon the sand, it fell. And great was the fall of it. Now, if you read the Sermon on the Mount, you know it's rather, sometimes can be difficult to understand, but Jesus uses humor in it. He uses sarcasm. He uses various different other ideas in it. That sermon that he preached, it amazed everybody that was in attendance that day. It still amazes us today. The greatest sermon ever preached by Jesus himself, the Sermon on the Mount. But the thing that sticks out to me most about the Sermon on the Mount that goes along with what we're talking about is the way he closes that sermon. He closes it by saying, and it kind of reminds me of the three little pigs, right? The house made out of brick, the house made out of wood, and the house made out of hay, and the big bad wolf blew and blew and blew, and it knocked down every house except for the house made out of brick, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's the same idea. He says, if you want your house to stand up, if you don't want it to blow over when the winds of life come, when the storms come, when the bad, evil wolf comes and huffs and puffs and blows on your house, he says, then to practice what I'm preaching. He says, do what I say. If you want to stand strong, then just do what I say. Jesus said in Luke 11:28, and he said, yea, rather blessed are they that hear the word of God and keep it. James, the brother of Jesus, says it even more simply in James chapter 1, verse 22. He says, but be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Be doers of the word. So that is the big idea, if you will, to change the picture of how we're representing Jesus. To change the picture that our world sees of who Christ really is. I believe it starts right here with you and with me. And how we do that is take the words of Jesus, the ones that are written in red in most people's Bibles, and put them into practice. Literally, that's all it is. Take his words and do them. That's a very unoriginal idea, but it can be revolutionary in your life. It will change not just your life, and I hope it does change your life, and it's already started to change my life as well. It will not just change these people's lives. It'll change the world around us' life. It will have to. It will change your family. It will change your workplace. It will change your friendships. It will change this world if we will truly do what he's called us to. He's called us to be his disciples. He's called us to represent him. We have that opportunity. It shouldn't be a burden. It should be a great opportunity that we jump after in our lives to do what God's called us to do. So let me give you 5 things, and I'm just going to read them off because this is what the next 5 weeks are going to be over. I believe there's really 5 main topics, if you will, that Jesus really talked about. I would say they were the focus of his teachings, if you will. And that's what we're going to break down over the next several weeks. The first thing that he talks about is being. It's being. You say, what do you mean by being? Well, so many times Jesus talks about the importance of spending time with God and just being with him. So many times I believe we focus on doing for God, but we don't focus enough on being with him. One of the things we're talking about on Wednesday nights is prayer, and I forgot to mention about Wednesday nights, but still, folks who come at 6:30 on Wednesday nights, we're continuing our series through prayer, and I hope it's been very good. I hope that you'll make plans to be there and be a part of that. But that's what we need more of, is just being with him. Spending time with him. And so before he invites us to do things for him or through him or in his name, he invites us to come into a relationship with him. That's why I said the most important thing you can do if you don't know Christ is to give your heart and life to him, because if you don't know him, if you're not in him, then everything else we're going to talk about is not going to matter. Right? We have to be with him. Our relationship with God is going to determine how effective we are at actually doing the things that He asks us to do. So let's not miss the opportunity of being with Him. Let's not lose the focus on spending time with God and making sure our relationship with Him is where it needs to be. So there's being. Number 2, there's forgiving. Forgiving. I've mentioned this many a time. The number one thing that I've ever done counseling in any age, in any part of my ministry, is the issue of forgiveness. Forgiveness. So many of us struggle with receiving God's forgiveness, or forgiving ourselves, or forgiving others. And so, but listen, for us to truly represent Jesus in this world, we have to have a good understanding of God's grace in our lives and be able to extend that grace to others. If you're not willing to forgive other people and to be forgiving as Christ forgives us, then we're never going to accomplish what God wants us to accomplish in this life. So there's being and there's forgiving. Number 3, there's serving. There's serving. It's pretty simple, isn't it? After spending time being with Him, after receiving His forgiveness, now we are motivated. After all that He's done for me, I want to serve Him. After all that God has done for me, and I'm going to talk about some of this tonight. I hope that you'll come back. I want us to talk about this tonight. After all that God's done for us, the least that we can do is live for Him. He gave His life. He gave His Son's life on the cross for you and for me. Why would we not want to serve Him? Why would we not want to dedicate our lives to Him? Why would we not want to get out into the community and help those in need and love our neighbors? Number 4 is giving. It's giving. Jesus talked about the kingdom of heaven more than anything else, but a very close second was money. He said, "Oh, Brother Adrian, here we go, about money." I rarely talk about money. I rarely do. I know it's biblical, and I know I probably should. Not probably. I know I should talk about it more than I do. But sometimes I just feel the pressures of not. And nobody in this congregation has ever said anything to me about preaching too much about money. I hate the stigma that preachers get about preaching about money. But the Bible talks a lot about giving. A lot about it. And through the words of Jesus, you'll notice it's impossible to be a stingy Christian. Really. So we're going to talk about giving some. Jesus followers are generous. Then number 5 is going. It's going. It's no coincidence at all that many of Jesus' last words in the gospel, and even the last things that He said in the book of Acts, what does it center on? It centers on the fact that we, as Jesus followers, must be His hands and feet in our community. We are to go into all the world, the uttermost parts of the world even, to share the gospel. We are His mouthpiece. We're to go out and tell the good news of the same Jesus that died on the cross for my sins, has died on the cross for everybody's sins, and forgiven what I've done, is done the same for everybody. Those are the 5 things. Pretty simple, isn't it? Being, forgiving, serving, giving, and going. I believe those are the 5 targets. Those are the 5 principles, if you will, that we're going to focus on that characterize a Jesus follower. At least from the mouth of Jesus, they are. And so over the next 6 or so weeks, we're going to go on this journey, if you will, and put these things into practice. We're going to break them down starting next week. I know it's Father's Day, but since we started this, we're going to honor our father, honor our men next week. But we're going to continue with it. We're going to start with being next week. And I want us to dive into this idea of being with God and spending time with Him and making Him a priority in our lives. So let me leave you with 2 things, and then we're done. A lot of this information comes from a book called the Red Letter Challenge. And it's a 40-day challenge that you can go through. It has a workbook that you can go through on your own if you want to do that. It's something you can look into. But we're going to talk about a lot of it here, even on Sunday nights, with some of the stuff we're going to go through. But there's 2 things I want to encourage you to do. I really believe these next 6 weeks can transform your life and transform this church's life if we will just put into practice what's already right in front of us in plain letters on the page or on the screen. They're right there. It's simple. But why don't we do it? Why don't we do it? Well, I hope that you'll make a decision to do that and to dive in. But here's 2 things I want you to do as we go through this together. I want you to make a commitment to do this. Number 1, this sounds very simple, but you'd be surprised how many times we leave this out. We need to invite Jesus into this experience. You say, well, we're at church. Of course, Jesus is a part of this experience. Well, not necessarily. I'm very competitive. Okay, if you read our our thing Sunday night. We played cornhole, and other than Brother Mike cheating so many times, we had a great time. And but I'm competitive, and I can get a little loud, right? I'm just a loud guy, but I can get a little competitive, and it's just all in good fun. But sometimes when you have a challenge in front of you like this, and you're thinking, okay, 5 things to become more like Jesus, to represent Him better. I almost treat it like a challenge. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get all these 5 down before so and so. I want to be, and I want to feel. And you sound like, how crazy is that? But some people are like that. Some people see themselves that way. But if you don't invite Jesus into this process, it's all for nothing. If all you're looking at is, I want to say I did it so Brother Adrian or my other congregation members can look at me and say, oh, look how spiritual. No, if you've got to invite Jesus as a part of this process. That's the real problem in this world. Many people do not believe in Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and God's solution to the problem is that the Word would become flesh. Yes, that was embodied in the person of Jesus Christ. We know that in the book of John, chapter 1. But we are God's Word in the flesh as well, in the sense of we're the only Bible that some people are ever going to read, aren't we? People you work with, people you live with, may never darken these doors, may never crack open a Bible and read the red letters for themselves, but they can see it embodied in you. So make Jesus a part of this experience. And again, if you're not saved, if you have any doubt at all, you make sure that you're saved. Give your heart and life to Christ today. So invite Jesus into the Spirit. And the second thing is this, and I'm done. Invite others into this experience. Invite Jesus and invite others. You're going to find that some things that Jesus asked us to do might be easier than we thought, but there are some very difficult things as well. Some of the things He calls us to do are downright scary when we get into it. They're way out of our comfort zone many times He's called us to do. And yes, we have God with us and we need His strength, but I guarantee you that if you try to put Jesus' words into practice long enough, you're going to need support from other people. I want to encourage you to include your spouse in this process. I want to include your family. I know Miss Ashley's not here on Sunday morning, but this is something we're going through in our family as well. Even I've got some kids stuff that we're going through as well to help them apply it to their lives, because it's that important to do. We need support from our family, from others, and then we need support from our church family. I know there are times that anybody in the family, you can irritate each other. Sometimes in church family, it's the same way, right? Sometimes you can just be irritated by somebody else. And there are other times we're scared and we don't know what to do. Christ asks us to do some hard things, but we should be there for each other. Somebody in this church come to somebody else and say, I know it's hard what we're going through. I know it's scary. I know you're struggling right now, but I'm here with you. I'm on your side. I'm here for you if you need me. Let's do this together. We need each other. That's what a church is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be a family. And I feel like we've got to get that back. We've got to get that sense of camaraderie that we come together, even tonight, as we come together and say, hey, we're on the same team here. We're working this out together. This isn't a competition. We're not giving out a trophy. We're trying to help each other across that finish line and stand up and be the witness that God called us to be. So let's do it together. We can do this. When we fail, we can say, no, don't give up. Come on, let's keep going. We really are better together. Every time I've ever set a goal in my life, I've always done it better when I've had somebody to help me, right? Even this weight loss journey that I've been on for the last few months, it's only stuck this time because Ashley's been helping me, been walking with me and helping me out. Because if I'm left to do it on my own, it's just not going to happen most of the time. We need other people. So, to put Christ's words into practice, we need strength from Jesus and we need support from others. So this is what the red letter challenge is, if you will. Now this morning was a little bit different. Like I said, next week we're going to focus in on the first one about being. But through these next 6 weeks, you are going to be led to spend more time with God than you ever have before, with the God who loves you. Through this, if we'll do what God wants to do, you will forgive people that you never thought you'd be able to. You may even be able to forgive yourself for the first time. You know, it hits home to some of you. You'll be able to serve and sacrifice more than you ever have before. You'll become a more generous person. And we'll become bolder and courageous in what we say and in how we live. I absolutely can think of no greater cause than the cause of living for Jesus Christ. There is no greater cause. There is no greater calling. After all that He has done for you and for me, after the sins that that He's helped overcome in our lives, there's nothing that I would rather do, nothing that I would rather do than follow after Jesus and help other people find Him and know the same Jesus that I know. We'll represent the real Jesus. We'll go out with good intentions and we'll hit the right targets if you'll be all in looking at the red letters of the Bible. Every head bowed, every eye closed this morning. Would you stand to your feet? We're not going to have a formal invitation this morning. I know it's a different type of sermon. But my prayer for quite a while has been for God to transform this church to be who He wants it to be. Not the church that Brother Adrian wants it to be. Not the church that you all want it to be. But to be the church that God died for it to be. And I believe this is one of the first steps. I believe the prayer on Wednesday night, the prayer series is a good step in that direction. I believe getting our focus down and our mission statement and things we talked about on Wednesday night before our prayer is a good way to do that. I think this is a great way to focus on the words of Jesus and to put them into practice. And so I'm asking you to commit to this. I'm asking you to not take this as maybe you do another sermon and say, okay, it was a good sermon, thanks, Brother, and then you walk out and you never think about another thing about what it's not about what I'm saying, it's about what Jesus is saying and has said. And I'm asking you to not just be a hearer this morning. I know you can hear me. I'm loud. I know you can hear me. I'm asking you to be a doer this morning. To make a commitment to be a doer, and it starts by being back tonight. It starts by taking the time and the sacrifice to be back tonight at 5 o'clock. To apply this even more so into our lives. So we can leave here amped up going, you know what, I'm ready. I'm ready to go out to the workplace tomorrow, to see my family this week. I'm ready to show them who the real Jesus is in my life. So I want to encourage you to take this journey with me. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand and make the commitment in front of me right now. But I want you to make a commitment before God right now. I hope that right now in your life you're saying, God, I'm all in to this. How simple it is, how elementary it is. But I want to follow your words like never before. I want to be the Christian that you saved me to be. And finally, if you're here today and you don't know Jesus Christ, then please see me after the service. You make sure that you nail this down before you leave here, because it's not worth putting off. If you're not guaranteed tomorrow, don't put it off. Make it.